I spent a good amount of my adult life living in secrets, holding things in that nobody else knew, not knowing how to tell people what was going on inside of me. One might say that I spent a good amount of my life living two different realities. The one that others saw, and the one that I lived on the inside. I held on to these secrets that somewhat defined me for more than 30 years. I didn't know how to say them out loud. I didn't know how to find help, but I knew I needed it. There was a day when my world came crashing in, and I felt the weight of all these things I'd been holding on to for so long. I knew in that moment that I needed help, but I didn't know how to find help. I started secretly drinking alcohol, thinking that would numb the pain, and it did for a minute. And then things started feeling worse inside of me. So I went and found some help. I tried talking to counselors and trying to figure out what was going on inside of me, because honestly, I didn't know at this point. All I knew is I felt broken, and I didn't know why. All these things that I thought I had put neatly tucked away, I thought I had dealt with, then I thought I prayed enough. I thought I had asked God to take them away. I remember when I first started thinking back on the abuse that I experienced as a child, that how it was affecting me these 30 years later. How is it possible that something that I had experienced when I was so very little was profoundly affecting the woman I was today? See, when I was 4 years old, this man had entered my life and he sexually abused me. He took a piece of me that day that as an innocent child I never knew, never understood, couldn't even conceptualize what was happening. My parents did their best to protect me from this person. But then fast forward about 10 years later, another man comes into my life, and the same thing all over again. So right around the age of 14, I met a second man who came into my life and started telling me things like I was special, that he loved me, that I had a special place in his life. But I didn't understand, I guess, what was going on because I was so young. See, he was an adult and I was a child. And there was no reason for us to be friends. And I remember that light switch flip where he went from talking to me one moment to yelling at me, screaming at me. Here I am, this little girl. And I felt hopeless. I couldn't believe somebody would say these things to me. And those things sat with me for a long time. I held them as little secrets, as a definition of who I was for the next 20 years. I began to hear things in my own head that you're not good enough. Nobody's going to love you. You're a failure. They impacted the very person that I was becoming. They began to define me. They began to make me feel like I wasn't good enough. That even if I read in the Bible or script that God loved me, that he thought I was something special, I couldn't believe it. Not me. I mean, that's what everybody told me. At least that's what I thought. Almost like feels like a weight or an anchor inside of you, and one that you can't show to anybody because you're afraid that nobody's going to understand or believe or trust or accept. So you just keep it all in a little bit longer. Because really, I think the hope is that if you just hold it in long enough, it'll just disappear. Maybe all the pain will become quiet. The noise from the busyness will wash over and be louder than the noise of the pain, of the voices I hear that tell me I'm not good enough. And then in my early 30s, there was this, perfect storm in my life. We had a lot going on. There was a lot of external pressure. And when that happened, the pressure just became so intense around me. I remember thinking, I don't know how much more I can take. I just don't know. And then one day I just fell apart. At that time, it felt bigger than what we'd call the weight of the world on my shoulders. I felt like I had the weight of more than just that, more than the world on my shoulders, more than I could even bear. I was being crushed. So I knew I couldn't do this alone, so I desperately started trying to find counselors. I spent hours trying to find the right person. It was hard to find someone who knew how to deal with trauma and who could help me from faith perspective. I was having a hard time finding it. Because to me, faith was so important. It is still important. And I wanted to have both, someone who knew how to help me work through my stuff, but also would combine faith. And I just kept looking and looking. And finally, I found some people to help me. And I pieced together this team to help me through. Some people who came up from a faith perspective and people who could come at it from a trauma perspective, and just helped me put these pieces together, helped me be able to figure out what is going on in my head. Those next few years were some of my darkest moments, but also some of my moments of greatest joy. Which, when I say that out loud, seems so strange. That there was going to be hope, but I couldn't let myself fully believe it yet. Because I had just lived in this world for so long, holding on to so many secrets and so much pain that I thought, this is just going to be temporary. I had a wonderful husband who was there when nobody else saw. These really dark moments when all the memories would come flooding in and it would overwhelm me. He was there to hold me, to keep me steady. But there was also God. And without him and without the peace that he gave me during this time, I know there's no way I could have made it through. There's no way I could have done this on my own. So I continued to go through counseling and continue to do all the things that were asked of me, continue to do the hard things, working on my struggles, my identity, my self-worth, all those things that I held on so dearly to, the things that had defined me for so long. I began to make a shift and to be able to see that God was writing my story, and that even in the midst of my pain, even in the midst of all of this brokenness, all the things that I never would have imagined, that he was weaving them together to something quite beautiful. I mean, I know my story's not done yet, and I know he's still working things together. But I also know now, more than ever, that God can take such a mess. I mean, it doesn't matter how broken my life was. God was able to take all of those pieces and to make something amazing. And so through that, God just keeps opening doors for ministry to other women, for service to other women, to be able to share with them the hope that their story, that what they're going through doesn't have to be the end. It doesn't have to be all that there is. That's where God has me today, in a place where he's taken me to the other side of my healing. He's helped me walk it out. Doesn't mean I'm perfected or everything's totally 100% okay. I still have my moments. But even in my weakness, God is using my story to allow me to have compassion for women that I may not have been able to have compassion with before. And that's the thing that I want to share with women so much, is that it's not, your story doesn't have to end with the pain. Your story doesn't have to end with the abuse, the trauma, whatever you've been through. It's not about that. It's about walking through that, growing in maturity, understanding how that affected you, but also becoming stronger. Allowing God to work in your life and know that he loves you more than anything, and that you have value and worth, because there is a God who created you for a specific purpose in mind. What an amazing thing that I get to do. And I'm so grateful that God has chosen me and allowed me to do these things.